Have you ever noticed that when one side of your nose feels completely blocked, the other side suddenly seems to be doing all the breathing? And then hours later, the situation somehow switches. One nostril opens up, the other one gets stuffy, you might think you're getting sick, or maybe you slept in a weird position. But here's the strange part. Your nose may be doing this on purpose. Your body has a built-in system that regularly changes which side of your nose handles more of the airflow. It's called the nasal cycle. And once you notice it, you may start noticing it everywhere. We usually think of the nose as a simple passage. Air comes in, air goes out, that's it. But your nose is actually doing several jobs at the same time. Every breath you take through your nose is being processed. The air needs to be warmed, it needs to be humidified, tiny particles need to be trapped, and the air needs to be prepared before it reaches your lungs. Inside your nose are structures covered with tissue and blood vessels. These tissues can swell and shrink. And that's extremely important, because when the tissue on one side swells, the space available for airflow becomes smaller. Meanwhile, the other side may have more room. So even though both nostrils are still working, one side can become much easier to breathe through. And then, the balance slowly changes. Here's where things get really weird. Your nervous system can influence the blood flow inside the tissues of your nasal passages. One side becomes slightly more congested, the other side becomes less congested. Then, after a period of time, they gradually switch. This repeating pattern is called the nasal cycle. It doesn't happen on exactly the same schedule for everyone, and you may not even notice it. But your nose can continuously adjust the resistance to airflow between the two sides. Think of it like two lanes on a highway. Both lanes are open, but sometimes one lane is more crowded while the other lane is moving freely. Then later, the traffic pattern changes. Your nose is basically managing its own tiny two-lane breathing system. So why would evolution create something so strange? Why not simply keep both nostrils completely open all the time? One leading idea is that alternating airflow may help different parts of the nasal tissue recover. Remember those blood vessel-rich tissues inside your nose? They're constantly exposed to incoming air. That means they're dealing with changes in temperature, moisture, dust, particles, and other environmental factors. By alternating airflow, different areas may get periods of lower airflow and recovery. There's also another important function. Your nose isn't just trying to move air. It's helping your body process the air before it reaches your lungs. The nasal passages help warm and humidify incoming air, and mucus and tiny hairs help trap particles. So your nose is more like a biological air conditioning and filtration system than a simple hole in your face. Here's a simple experiment. Close your mouth, take a slow breath through your nose. Now gently close one nostril. Then switch. Notice the difference. One side may feel much easier to breathe through. Now wait a little while and try it again later. You might notice that the balance has changed. And here's the important part. You didn't necessarily become sick. Your nose may simply be changing its airflow pattern. The nasal cycle can be subtle enough that you don't notice it, until something makes the difference much more obvious, like allergies, cold, dry air, or inflammation. This is where the nasal cycle can become annoying. Imagine your left nasal passage is naturally more congested at the moment. Normally, you might barely notice. But now imagine you also have allergies. The tissues inside your nose are already swollen. Add the normal nasal cycle on top of that, and suddenly one side can feel completely blocked. You may lie down at night, turn onto your side, and suddenly think, why can't I breathe through this nostril? Then you roll over. A few minutes later, the other side feels worse. It can almost seem like your nose is playing a game with you. But there are several things happening at once. Your body position can influence congestion. Blood flow can change. The nasal tissues can swell. And the normal nasal cycle continues in the background. Have you ever noticed that your nose seems more congested at night? There can be several reasons. When you lie down, fluid distribution in your body changes. Blood flow to the tissues in the nose can also change. And if you're already dealing with allergies, a cold, or irritation, that extra congestion can make the normal nasal cycle much more noticeable. That's why you might be perfectly fine during the day and then suddenly struggle to breathe through one side when you get into bed. Your nose hasn't necessarily stopped working. It's just that the difference between the two sides has become much easier to feel. Here's another fascinating part. Your brain doesn't just receive information from your nose. It also uses information about airflow, temperature, pressure, and chemical signals. Your sense of smell depends heavily on what's happening inside your nasal passages. And different airflow patterns can influence how odor molecules interact with the smell receptors inside your nose. So your nose isn't simply delivering oxygen. It's part of a much larger sensory system. Every breath is giving your nervous system information about the environment around you. The air you're breathing, the temperature, the moisture, and the chemicals you're smelling. Your nose is is constantly working, even when you aren't thinking about it. So if your nose is constantly changing, why don't you notice it? Because your brain is extremely good at ignoring things that aren't important. You don't consciously think about every heartbeat, you don't count every breath, and you don't normally monitor every tiny change in airflow through your nostrils. Your body handles it automatically. But the moment something changes dramatically, you notice. A stuffy nose, a cold, seasonal allergies, dry air, or lying down at night. Suddenly, something your body has been doing quietly for years becomes impossible to ignore. For many people, some degree of alternating nasal airflow is completely normal, but there's an important difference between a normal nasal cycle and having one side of your nose persistently blocked. If one side stays blocked for a long time, or you're having significant trouble breathing, frequent nosebleeds, severe pain, or other concerning symptoms, that's different. Persistent nasal blockage can have many possible causes, including allergies, inflammation, structural differences, or other nasal conditions. So don't assume that every blocked nostril is simply the nasal cycle. If something is persistent or concerning, it's worth talking with a healthcare professional. Think about what your nose is doing right now. You probably weren't paying attention to it. But somewhere inside your face, blood vessels are changing. Nasal tissue is swelling and relaxing. Airflow is shifting. Your nose is warming and humidifying the air. Your nervous system is monitoring what's happening, and you don't have to consciously control any of it. Your body is running the entire system automatically, and every few hours, the balance can shift. One side becomes more open. The other becomes more congested. Then they switch. So the next time you notice that one nostril seems blocked, don't immediately assume something is wrong. Your nose might simply be doing one of its strangest automatic tricks. The nasal cycle is a reminder that your body isn't just sitting there waiting for you to tell it what to do. It's constantly adjusting itself, second by second, breath by breath. And perhaps the strangest part? You probably never even noticed it until someone told you to pay attention. So go ahead, take a breath through your nose. Which side feels more open right now? Left? Right? Or maybe you'll check again later and discover that your body has already switched sides. And now, you know why.